Forward to Introduction to Fasting 3 Days for Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Boris Johnson, and Mr. Neel Farage. Before publishing the introduction to the former and the coming videos, a foreword has proven necessary. This video was made on the 16th of December 2020, and it has taken me a whole month to get it translated into English. During this time, important events happened beyond the Channel and the ocean, such as the signs of a capitulation of the brave in England, and in America, the turmoil of a nation on the brink of disaster. On a Wednesday, some days ago, abused citizens descended into the streets to proclaim their enduring support to the president they had legitimately chosen, a choice of a majority that had soon been discarded by the opposing side, the which was determined to take power at any cost and no matter what, with all disregard and contempt for truth, honesty, and democracy. Things turned out not so good on that occasion, as there happened to be in that place people that were out to cause a stir that could conveniently be blamed on the cheated president's supporters and consequently on the legitimate president himself. Whether the whole thing was arranged ahead of time and caused precisely for this result, and whether it really was done by true Donald Trump supporters or not, nonetheless, the accusing American mainstream medias and the world's echoing them soon let the whole planet know that they were ready to make one gulp of the naughty president who is guilty of being esteemed of his people without condescending to practicing the vile treachery that his opponent was forced to resort to win the game. Treachery which he did and still does quite unbegrudgingly practice, for that matter. I am not out to judge of the troublemakers' political convictions, providing they have any, and whether they were sincere supporters of Donald Trump or not. It is not written on their faces, even though they may have been seen wielding signs that bore the name of the legitimate president. They may just as well hate him. They may just as well have been there for entirely different reasons, and could actually hate him, knowing that their acts of rowdiness and violence are actually more unfavorable than beneficial to the man they say they are there to support. Strange and not so funny way to support a serious cause. Therefore, that is not the point of my comment, and really it is an impossible thing to know of a truth. I am not the one to decide either whether the events happened spontaneously from true supporters of Donald Trump or whether they were planned and ordered by someone else secretly, for that also, as is just impossible to know. No, really, my point to this foreword is this. In the face of these drastic events, I want to quickly drop a line and draw some attention to a now frequent yet unrecognized phenomenon in our society today, that of the auto goal. The fact that it remains totally unnoticed of the majority of the general public and unrecognized, unacknowledged by the medias, almost like a taboo, since its dealings are kept secret and unpublicized, all this makes of it a highly successful scheme on the public scenery. And so it goes. Everybody has at least a rudimentary understanding of football or basketball, and all such sports. Hockey and cricket work that way too. Well, everyone understands at least that much about them, that while two teams are present on the field, each team must throw a ball into a basket or an area that represents the adversary's territory, and at the same time must guard their own territory and prevent it from being reached and touched by a ball shot by that adversary. It's simple. Whereas they strive to gain points for their own camp, everybody makes all the efforts to prevent the enemy from attaining the same and making their points, their goal, within their territory too. No player in his right mind would purposely send the ball against his own camp, and when this happens, it is usually due to a lack of attention or a clumsy move on the part of the player who messed up. The poor guy then pays it pretty dearly in terms of shame, with reproof and having to endure the irritation of his co-players against him, because he caused the team to lose the game, or at least he contributed adversely towards a defeat for them. Everyone on the teams understands that and does everything in their power to avoid such a situation. That's the game. Well, that's in sports. In sports and in real life, one tries to protect one's camp from the attacking party that represents a threat to it. So it is necessary to play in order to win. Well, that's in sports and in mostly all contexts of life. But it is not so in politics. Indeed, in politics, the practice of the autogol, that some say was successful in Pearl Harbor a little less than a century ago, has made discreet, or secret even, but persevering practitioners again in the last decades. In the presence of two opposing adversaries, it consists of one of the parties, the most crooked one, perpetrating one or more acts of violence against themselves, or a violation of their own undisputable rights, while they accuse their innocent adversary of those acts, imputing the responsibility of them on those who might just as well have had absolutely nothing to do with it. So whereas it is unthinkable in a sports game and is considered a failure and the dumbest thing to do in that circumstance, in politics, the practice of the autogol is actually gaining in numbers of enthusiastic practicing partisans. This is generally done to degrade a pacifistic but disturbing movement of protest of a given population against an otherwise non-legitimated power, and to slander the protesters and their cause before the public eye. The general public eye, those people who are not very much involved with the subject and don't intend to be. At the same time, this practice attracts the public sympathy upon the pretended victim and his cause, as well as it provides him or them illegitimately and fallaciously but quite efficiently with an opportunity to strike and retaliate with some kind of blow on the accused in return for those allegedly unjust attacks he says he has suffered at their hand. The consequences of this might develop into a war between countries like in the 1940s, or into a very drastic hardening of coercive power into brutal and arbitrary force in a given country that resorts to this practice if it is done on a national level. For example, in France in 2018-2019, with the pacifistic social movement of the GJ, the Yellow Vest movement, policemen of the CRS forces were actually seen and filmed while changing their outfit into that of the casseurs, the breakers or destroyers, and back into their uniforms again, after they performed this, their foul duty of rioting under the usurped and slandered name of the Yellow Vest movement. We all know how the Macronian government power reverted to barbarian brutality in the Yellow Vest movement's repression, the which fallacious legitimation was provided by the violent elements that infested the Yellow Vest movement, totally Macron-backed infiltrations in my humble opinion. The first time I got this very strong and firm conviction of the use of this practice in our modern history was upon seeing the pacifistic protest movement against the very first World Forum be infiltrated by casseurs, the breakers or destroyers, that turned it into a big riot and actually did nothing else than provide the superpowers with an opportunity to wage, through the mainstream medias, a vast campaign and a totally unfair trial against the pacifist movement of protest. It also provided the pretext that the superpowers were waiting for to harden greatly the armed and brutal repression against any sort of antisocial injustice mass protest. This method has kept being used repeatedly and never stopped being used as a common policy ever since by all dictature-minded and dictature-aimed powers of the West. So is the Macronian government, and so will Joe Biden's government be if allowed to win all the way, as he has already largely proven, without even sitting on the presidential seat. So the practice of the autogol has now made its bed in the societal affairs of the Occident, of the West, most commonly by staging violence and unrest, at best incivilities, to be imputed arbitrarily and without any recognition nor claim from the concerned, on whichever part or just cause is to be degraded and slandered in the face of public opinion. Basically, it comes down to this. The side with the most mendacious and unpopular purpose and aim commandeers and secretly sponsors acts of violence against itself, to be perpetrated right under the public eye in order to attract unto itself opinion, sympathy, and likewise reproof on their usually pacifistic adversary, who know nothing nor have anything to do with the scheme. You follow? It's twisted and crooked, but it works well for the side that stoops to such base and foul practice, since it also permits a strong and coercive reaction on the part of the apparently attacked party. The scheme actually allows a threefold success for them, as we said. The public sympathy it arouses on behalf of the crooked, of unpopular nature, though mostly hidden designs. The degradation in the public eye of the worthy cause of the falsely accused protesters who have nothing to do with the violent schemes that use their movement to commit their reprehensible actions. Those who have to bear the hat after it and answer for it anyway. And the foul but victimized and pretendedly innocent power that can then unfold measures of retortion on the innocent accused and against his camp and his cause. So it's all gain for those who practice intimidation and the vile but efficient method of the outer goal in politics. And of course, you've guessed what I'm aiming at, and what my point is in exposing this theme in the foreword to my introduction to Fasting 3 Days for Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Boris Johnson, and Mr. Farage. My own opinion is worth what it's worth. God only knows what it is. But of a truth, you'll never manage to convince me that the Wednesday events were spontaneous, nor that they were perpetrated by true and sincere supporters of Donald Trump, though they stand accused of having pretendedly committed those acts, causing their chosen president more harm than good. To me, it is obvious that the whole thing is nothing else than an outer goal, and that the White House assaults were caused by the hidden sponsors of those acts, those whom this forfeit serves, in that through it they seem to be justified as they pretend to bring down their hated, honestly and law-abiding adversary, Donald Trump. The events were caused by Donald Trump's own adversary, enemy should I rather say, when you consider the base and vile methods he resorts to gain control of the country. And they are part of the framing plan unfolded by this opponent to gain in false legitimacy and abusive justification towards the success of his disloyal and treacherous scheme unfolding towards that very goal. As for little me, I do not therefore withdraw one word of the explanations given in this video. Having thus said, I persist and sign. Mary Magdalene, Evelyn Monique Jones Emery.